Bop, boop, bop, ba-doo, bop. Bop. Welcome, everybody, to the X Factor podcast. I am your co-host, riding shotgun along beside the brains of the operation, Mr. the Great, His Majesty, whatever surname you prefer to use with his title, the Great Jon Rennie, as I call him. John, say hello to everybody.
Hello, Coach Brew. How are you today?
I said say hello to everybody. You already
hello
said
to everybody.
Hello, there you go.
Hello, Coach Brew.
I'm fabulous. Thanks for asking. And manning the controls of this pirate ship is the DFE, our fabulous show producer and intern. Never trust a man with two first names.
What's up, everyone?
So he's low energy like Jeb Bush. What's up, everyone? Please clap. Please clap.
All right. I'll wake up.
There we go. He's not fully caffeinated yet like the rest of us.
Oh, I'm fully caffeinated.
What are we talking about today? We were talking about, every week on this podcast, we talk about the X Factor. And for those of you tuning in for the first time who might not know what the X Factor is, I'm going to let Jon Rennie explain that to you.
Yeah, the X Factor. These are people, companies, industries, people that are doing things above and beyond and are actually changing history and making a difference. And so we're going to feature whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's musicians, whether it's inventors, people who are changing the game. And that's what this podcast is all about. And we're looking for, and we're going to talk about those people that are really changing the game in their industries.
It would be safe to say that we are featuring stadium status leaders from all walks of life.
Stadium status leaders from all walks of life. Absolutely. And what is stadium status, by the way, Coach Brew? That's a
fabulous book from what I hear.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's actually one of my favorite books. And I'm not just saying that because we're on the podcast together.
You got me so fired up, I might go read it. I might buy it and read it myself.
Well, let's just say that there's one idea in that book that gained me $1 million of business in my manufacturing business, which is peak demand. And so that book is, at least in my mind, worth $1 million.
It really is.
So but anyways,
you can go to coachbrew.com and take a look at all my books. No free shout outs, but you can go to coachbrew.com and take a look at all my books.
Yes. Stadium Status, great one.
Yeah, including Stadium Status. So what are we talking about on the pod today?
We are going to talk about some musicians that have the
sell out stadiums.
These are musicians who crush it. In fact, who I'm going to talk about today actually set a Guinness World Record for the highest amount of money paid for one appearance in a concert. So
is that the guys that did the Mbop song?
No, that's the Hanson brothers, who are run a microbrewery right now, who could possibly be a sponsor of the show.
Not to be confused with the Hanson brothers from the movie Slapshot, which I'm confident Parker never saw.
Wow. Slapshot. That is actually one of my favorite movies of all time, and I haven't seen it in a long time. Maybe that should be an assignment for this week, because it's cold. We're recording this in December.
It's hockey season, eh?
Hey, it's hockey season, eh? So Parker, that might be a good assignment actually for all the three of us, is we should watch Slapshot and come back, and we should have an episode just on Slapshot, because that was definitely an X Factor kind of movie.
It looks like it was is it the 1977 one? Because it looks like when I was looking it up online, there's two of them.
Really? I don't remember what. 77? I don't know. Well, that was 80s, but
there can't be two. There's only one Slapshot.
Hold on.
Paul Newman.
Oh, yeah, here it is. Yep, Paul Newman. In the small New England town of Charlestown, the local mill is about to lay off 10,000 workers. That's like the setting of the story.
Was it Charlestown, Mass? I thought it was Charlestown, West Virginia.
No, it says in the small New England town.
It's got to be Charlestown, Mass, outside of Boston. Yeah. This is a day in the life with Parker, by the way, folks. If you're new to the podcast, you don't know this. Parker is I often think maybe he actually just crawled out from under a rock or escaped an Amish family and is now like a naturalized citizen for the first time, because you name the pop culture reference, the band, the movie, and cue up the crickets chirping sound effect with Parker. He's like, never heard of that.
Number of Jesus disciples. I don't know. Any sort of
9.
I
I'm
gotta say
quoting Top Gun earlier, and Parker's never seen Top Gun. That's probably all you need to know. That sums it up nicely. So today we're actually going to be talking music and X Factor entertainers. And John, you said you had one that set a Guinness Book record, and it wasn't the Bop guys.
No, so I'm going to be talking about Eddie Van Halen. I mean, rest in peace, Eddie. He died in October this year, 2020, the worst year in history. We lost Eddie Van Halen, but I'm going to talk a little bit about him. But yeah, just to, a little spoiler alert, he actually, the Van Halen was booked for a concert in 1983, and they were paid $1.5 million just to play at that festival in 1983. And that, if you take that, what are we worth today? It would be $4 million. In today's dollars, was paid just to show up with a 4-man band to play, 4 or 5 songs, and that's it. And there was $4 million right there. So that to me is an X Factor person. That's an X Factor musician. And that's who I chose to talk about today. And John, Coach Brew,
love to bottle that up and
ahead.
sell it. Right. Love to be able to bottle up that secret
that's
sauce.
the X Factor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Coach Brew, who are you going to talk about today in terms of X Factor musician?
Yeah, I am going to talk about the one and the only Mr. Eric Church.
Ooh.
And I'm not cursing. I did not just use an expletive. I am merely quoting what it says on the concert T-shirt at his merch booth. It literally reads Eric bleeping Church. And it is the most popular T-shirt he sells. Because it says Eric effing Church. So Parker can bleep that out and add a little beep. But yeah, Eric Church, because it hurts his sensitive ears. That might be the first time he's heard that word, John.
Could be. He just crawled out of the Amish community. That was the best.
So,
yes.
I think is the epitome of stadium status because of the way he did it. I also think Eddie Van Halen is the epitome of stadium status, having that X factor because of the way he did his thing too. Neither of these guys followed anyone else's route to success. They blazed their own trail, both literally and figuratively. And kind of did it the hard way, So let's talk about Van Halen first, because I have a funny and embarrassing Van Halen story for you.
Oh, I'm going to love to hear that. So, I don't know if I have a funny or embarrassing, but I definitely have some history with Van Halen growing up in the 80s. They were an influence. They were part of the soundtrack of my life, that's for sure. But what's interesting about Eddie Van Halen is, tremendous success, and we'll talk about that. And but he really left his mark on the rock and roll world, right? But he grew up basically he grew up very poor. He immigrated from Amsterdam and came to the U.S. when he was only 7 years old. And the thing is, everybody knows he's an amazing musician, but he actually couldn't read sheet music. His mom wanted him to be a concert pianist, and he took piano lessons. And the way he learned how to play piano was actually memorizing the finger movements of his instructor. And he couldn't even read music. He basically learned it by just watching your fingers, and he just had a natural ear for music. So, people think Eddie Van Halen, he must have, been rich and is successful. He started with absolutely nothing and no ability to even read music. So that's, I think, is pretty amazing, because a lot of times we think, well, I'm nobody. How can I be successful as an entrepreneur? I'm nobody. How can I be successful as a leader? How can I get my brand to grow? I'm nobody. Well, let me tell you, Eddie Van Halen started out as a complete and utter nobody. His parents came to the U.S. with $50 and a piano. And they immigrated into California and they had absolutely nothing. So it just goes to show you what you can achieve with very, humble roots.
Why the hell would you immigrate across the pond with like schlepping a piano with you?
Yeah, that was a fun fact I didn't know about.
That is weird.
I mean, I can understand taking a guitar and
shipping
a case.
costs and just like inconvenience and lugging that. Like that's an expensive piano, and I'm not even talking about like the actual device itself.
Yeah, so they came over in 1962, and so you can imagine what it cost to ship that piano in it. But the Eddie's father was a concert clarinetist who worked in, played in all sorts of different bands when he was in Europe, and his mom wanted him and his brother, Eddie and his brother Alex, to become concert pianist, classical pianist. How do
you spell that?
It's Pianist.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that you're talking about piano.
I'm talking about a piano.
Yeah.
Not Spencer's Gifts or whatever is in the back of Spencer's Gifts that we talked about in a previous episode. So
it's interesting. Like, can you imagine that conversation that the Van Halen boys had with their parents when they immigrated?
Yeah.
Like, really? We have to take the piano? Like, come on. Can't we just throw like a little portable Yamaha keyboard in a backpack? Do we really? It's going to be embarrassing traveling with a piano.
Yes. Yeah. They travel with a piano. Makes no sense. Unless that's the X factor.
Yeah.
So interesting. Everybody knows Eddie Van Halen's famous for his guitar playing. That's what he's known for. But his brother was always the drummer in the band. Van Halen, Alex was the drummer. But originally, when they started out playing together, Eddie played the drums, and Alex played guitar, which is really interesting. And what Eddie found out later on, that Alex was using his drum set whenever Eddie was gone, and he was becoming really good on the drums, and he decided he wanted to play
this is drums. Like from the movie Step Brothers. Don't touch my drum set.
That's it. It's exactly 100%. Yeah. So, I thought that was kind of interesting.
It's your, what off my drum set.
Oh yeah, Parker knows that.
Let me ask you this, John. At what point in their professional career or journey do you think they were no longer a disappointment to their world-class pianist parents?
That's a great question.
Like every parent has these certain aspirations for their kid. I want my kid to be a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, an accountant, whatever. Like they wanted their kids to be pianists.
Right.
And they started a rock band.
Yes.
Like if you're into classical piano, rock probably just sounds like noise, feedback, and like feedback's part of the deal. It's part of the artistry, but it probably just sounded like noise to them. I really wonder at what point they were no longer disappointed.
So, you can imagine your father is a concert clarinetist, right? Your mom wants you to play piano, classical piano, and you start a rock band and you sign your first album in 1978 that you put out. And the name of that album was called Van Halen, sold 10 million copies. He was 23 years old. So that his parents were still alive, right? And he was following some crazy dream of starting a rock band. And in 1978, they sold 10 million copies. And by the way, what's interesting about the story is that they played like they were poor, broke band when they formed Van Halen. They played all the bars and clubs in California, and it was only one night that they were playing in a concert. And it just so happens Gene Simmons from the band Kiss happened to be in the audience that day and said, "Holy cow, these guys are amazing!" And he flew them directly to New York and to help them make a demo tape of 12 songs, which is really how they launched into their fame.
Now, didn't he try and get them on his record label? He was starting a record label at some point.
So he was starting a record label, and Van Halen was rejected by his record label and actually signed with a different record label, which is interesting. So So Gene Simmons really
I
discovered
hope
that.
he fired his A&R people.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
so can you imagine, they didn't sign him. So this is another story about, the X factor. Sometimes you're going to come up and you're going to get rejection, right? You think that you got a great brand, you got a great product, and then the first time you try to sell it to a big company, you get rejected. So you think, well, woe is me. Well, guess what? Someone else signs Van Halen. They go on to send their first album ever. They sell 10 million copies.
What year was that?
It was 1978. So
Okay. So fun story before that. I believe it was shortly before that. Van Halen was opening for Ted Nugent. And as they were traveling to these different arenas on, Ted's tour, he would, they'd all go to the venue for the sound check. And during the sound check, Ted Nugent's kind of just like sitting side stage as Van Halen's like checking out his guitar. And Nugent's just blown away by what he heard coming out of the amp. And this is like really before they blew up and they just started packing venues all over the world on their own, headlining tour. And he just started to get really curious. Like, that's interesting. What kind of guitar is it? What kind of amp is it? Because this combination it's an incredible sound. And he thought maybe is like using some kind of electronic hack or a special, device to alter the sound. So after Van Halen did their sound check, Nugent just asked him, he's like, "Hey, Eddie, can I borrow your Stratocaster and try it out?" So he takes the guitar and he picked it up. He starts playing it. And a funny thing happened. Ted Nugent sounded exactly like Ted Nugent. He didn't sound anything like Eddie Van Halen, even though he's using Van Halen's amp and guitar. But the funny thing was, at the same time, Eddie is now like side stage and he's just messing around with Nugent's equipment. And Nugent had a Gibson Birdland guitar. So he plugged it into Nugent's Fender amp and started playing it. And he sounded exactly like Eddie Van Halen. And so I heard this interview. Ted Nugent was interviewed on a podcast called the Eddie Trunk Podcast. And I heard this story. And that's when Nugent just said, he's like, here's this kid who taught me a huge lesson. I'm like the seasoned veteran and they're opening for us. He's like, he taught me this huge lesson. Like, you create your own sound, you create your own brand, and like your audience gravitates to you because you're being uniquely you. It's not the equipment. What's the old saying? It's not the wand, it's the magician, right?
Yeah.
But it's got to be coming from your hands and your heart. So I just thought that was the coolest story. Van Halen could pick up any piece of crap guitar, plug it into an amp. It's going to sound like Van Halen.
Yeah.
There's so little to do with the equipment. And the funny thing was, and I'm going to quote Nugent in a second here. But the funny thing is, like, so often entrepreneurs, athletes, whoever is, trying to hone their craft and get better and compete, they try and copy someone else or they aspire to be like so-and-so as opposed to doing their own thing. And the two people we chose to talk about in this podcast absolutely 100% did their own thing. And that's why they're so successful. They weren't trying to be the next someone else, the next so-and-so. They were just trying to be the best Eddie Van Halen or the best Eric Church, So here's the cool thing. This is a quote from Ted Nugent on that podcast. When you practice your balls off, when you dedicate yourself to be the very best you can be, which describes every musician that you and I love, it's you, not even the Fenders or the Gibsons. It's you coming through your musical vision and the attack of the instrument. You could have an amp and a guitar. Don't change any of the settings and put 10 of your favorite guitar players on that set, and it will sound just like each individual. I think that sums it up. Like, you got to do you.
You got to do you. You got to find your own voice. And that's, and I'll say that's for every entrepreneur, every leader, everyone that's trying to be an author, or anyone who's starting a podcast. You got to find your own voice. Don't be don't be Joe Rogan when you start a podcast. You're never going to be Joe Rogan. There's only one Joe Rogan, and find your own voice. And that's a really important lesson here. And this one thing about the people we're going to talk about on the show is that the people that are going their own direction, they change industries based on them being them and not trying to be someone else. They're uniquely them. And Eddie was that kind of individual. He built his own guitar. I mean, the Frankenstrat is very famous. In the 80s, you saw this, red and black and white striped guitar they would play on stage. And it was a hand-built thing. And it was interesting. The reason he built it is he wanted to get a specific sound that he couldn't get from any guitar that he could find. So he was trying to get the physical attributes of a Stratocaster, but he wanted the sound of a Gibson. So he combined these two when he built this, what he called the Frankenstrat. And that's where he got this really unique sound, and something that no one had ever done before. And what's interesting I learned is that the way he played notes with both fingers was the first time anyone had ever really done that in rock guitar. And it became the standard going forward. Now, typical solos are all played that way, but he was the first he was an innovator when it came to that. He actually, I didn't know this, but he actually had, I don't know, there is 3 US patents for things that he generated and created to be able to, get his sound the way he wanted to. So kind of an innovator, and, he changed the game with respect to how music was played. This is somebody with the X factor. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it wasn't like he was trying to emulate someone else.
Yeah.
He built that thing from the ground up.
He built it from the ground up.
Yeah, when he could have just been like, "Oh, Jimi Hendrix is my hero. I want to try and sound like him." Because you think about how many guitarists Jimi Hendrix really was their hero. He's a virtuoso on a guitar. But no, he decided to the point where I'm going to build my own instrument to create my own unique sound.
Yeah, absolutely. So funny story. So I'm 16 years old. I go to my first rock concert ever. And
where was it?
It was Worcester, Massachusetts, in the whatever the auditorium they have there. And it was the 1984 tour of Van Halen. They had just released Diver Down, which was a massive success. In fact, by the way, the 4 albums after the first one all went multi-platinum, but Diver Down was a ginormous success. And I saw the next tour, which was 1984. This was where Jump, Panama, all those very famous songs were played for the first time live, right?
David Lee Roth jumping around in his leather pants and tassel shirt.
This is so 80s. It's not even funny. This is 1984, right? And I just funny because we were on the side of the stage and looking down onto the main stage. And I just remember there was one guy, they had stacks of speakers that went from the stage all the way to the ceiling of this arena. It was something I'd never seen before. Yeah. And I remember there was one guy who had seats right in front of the speakers, and he banged his head, long hair, the entire concert, the entire show. And it was so loud. I mean, you could feel the rock going through your body the whole time, and of course,
I can't even imagine that being fun.
16 years old.
Being that guy.
Oh yeah. Well, he probably was on heavy drugs, I'm thinking, but the point is like that was a major influence in my life. Just seeing Eddie Van Halen playing live, playing Eruption, playing, all these famous songs, Jump, and all these famous songs live was just absolutely amazing. And it's something that left like a real impression on me. And I've always had Van Halen on my playlist, and that's how many years later, right? So this is someone that affected me deeply just by his talent and by the talent of that group, those 4 guys in that band. So pretty amazing group of people. And Eddie Van Halen was just recently named. Out of the top 100 guitarists of all time, he was ranked number 8 by Rolling Stone magazine. So, and they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They got there in 19.
That number's low.
Yeah, I think it should be higher, but yeah. But so they were Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2007, and that song we were talking about, Jump, was actually was considered one of the top 500 songs that helped shape rock and roll. So again, unique guy, unique
Yep.
sound, and they changed the rock industry just by. I mean, they were really part of that original Monsters of Rock kind of concept, with these
So
big bands that could fill stadiums. And do you have a Monsters of Rock
fun,
story, Coach Brew?
fun fact. 1988, right after I graduated high school, a bunch of my friends and I got tickets to Monsters of Rock, which took place in the old RFK Stadium,
Yes.
former home of the Washington Redskins, which we can't even call them that now. We could get canceled for calling them that. They're the Washington football team.
Football team. Mm-hmm.
And so, so before I tell the story, let's ask Parker, and he can Google it because he's not going to know the answer. What's a Van Halen logo look like?
Wait, let me check every one of my notebooks from high school. I can tell you exactly what it looked like, because
Go ahead, John. Van Halen logo.
every high school student drew it on their notebook.
Yep.
Over and over
What's
again.
it look like?
It is. Well, hold on. It looks just like it's a V with an H beside it, but it looks like it has like wings.
Yeah.
That's it.
So it's a V and an H with wings coming off each side. So we go to Monsters of Rock, and this is it's the summer of '88. It's Van Halen, the Scorpions, Dokken, a little known bunch of nobodies named Metallica. In '88, they were not big, you know. And then a band called Kingdom Come, who opened for all those guys, you know. So we had an absolute blast. And I just remember the merch being so expensive. Like, I wanted a Monsters of Rock t-shirt. I wasn't going to pay like 20 at the time. $20 is a lot for a shirt back then, Parker. I wasn't about to pay that much for it. So I'm like, no. We go out in the parking lot after the concert, and we're on our way to our car, and there are these, you know, guys from downtown Washington, D.C. hawking t-shirts out of a big, like 33-gallon hefty steel sack bag, saying, hey, get your shirts here. You want a shirt? You need a concert shirt? So I'm like looking at it, holding it up. I'm like, this is the exact same shirt that was like $30 or 20 or whatever it was in the arena. And he's like, I give it to you for $5. $5 and it's yours. I'm like, sure. Hand him $5 bill, gives me a t-shirt. He takes off and goes down the street to the next schlub. So I thought nothing of it until I wore it like to the pool the next day, or like that, you know, the next week. I'm wearing my Monsters of Rock t-shirt, rocking this thing, you know, show everybody I went to the concert, I got the t-shirt. And I just remember a bunch of my friends looking at my shirt and laughing their asses off. Like, what's so funny? Like, you got a bootleg t-shirt. I'm like, so? It didn't say VH. It said HV.
Oh, no.
Like, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because they couldn't rip off the logo. So they did HV instead of VH, or like their printer was dyslexic. I don't know. But it said HV in really big letters at the top of the shirt, and then like all the other bands underneath it. All my friends are laughing at me, and like they're just like, hey, look at his shirt, everybody. Look at the like. And I thought I was going to be the cool kid, and I look like an idiot because I got a knockoff Van Halen shirt.
Wait, so did you not notice when you first got it?
I thought nothing of it when I first got it. I'm like, oh, cool, t-shirt, $5, deal. Like, I was afraid I was going to get in trouble for buying, you know, like when you buy tickets from a scalper, you're like, you know, let's get this done in a hurry and get out of here. Like buying, you know, something off the street like that. I was like 17 years old, you know, I wasn't looking closely. And
but how's that for hustling for that guy selling t-shirts outside the stadium, right? You know, like, oh, you want a $30 t-shirt from inside?
I love those guys.
Or a $5 t-shirt that I did in my basement.
And now today, like when I go to the NCAA Final Four, any sporting event, I never get a shirt in the arena.
Yeah.
Even if it's like my favorite team, or like I see something I like, I wait and I get one from the guy carrying the garbage bag out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
A, because it's a great story that brings back memories, but B, like, you know, that guy needs the money more than Ticketmaster and, you know, the folks at Gillette Stadium need my money for a Patriots t-shirt or whatever.
All the
Yeah.
big corporate.
Support small business.
Yeah.
And that is a small business
That
right
is a
there.
small business. Yep. Exactly. Well, how many of those guys that are hustling t-shirts eventually make it big? Some don't, but there's a few, like the FUBU, the guy who founded FUBU started selling.
Yeah, we should, that's give me another whole episode.
We got to do that because
he's amazing.
He's just selling them out of the back of his car and out of, he on the streets, he was selling t-shirts and look what he became, so interesting story. So that's my story on Van Halen, an amazing guy, really changed the entire rock scene. Considered one of the most influential guitarists in the history. I would say he's number one on my list on guitarists. He's someone that influenced my life and the band Van Halen did, obviously all those years. But that's just because of my age. But anyways, this guy definitely was a game changer. He definitely had the X factor and someone that really changed the game in the industry.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a great story too. One of the things I loved seeing, as sad as it was when he passed away, one of the things I loved seeing were all those tribute videos.
Yeah.
Whether it's a famous, musician playing the two-hand guitar lick, or just, an aspiring musician who played the guitar, trying to replicate that same sound. And no one can replicate that same sound, but it was just a cool, sort of salute to a fallen soldier, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Someone who changed the game. Oh, by the way, one little interesting point. So Michael Jackson, famous pop star again, he's another artist with an X factor, that's for sure. But the very famous hit Beat It, the guitar solo on that is actually done by Eddie Van Halen. And he did it in one take. He just sat down with the guitar, did it. They pressed record and he played it. And that became the solo, the very famous solo in that song. And because Eddie was on a different label than Michael Jackson, they wouldn't allow his name to be on the credits for that song. So for years, no one knew that he actually did the solo for that song, but he didn't.
So I heard he just did it for like a case of beer or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And as a favor to Michael Jackson, and just didn't let his band members know.
Yeah, but it was done.
It makes sense. If they're on different labels, there's all those politics.
Yeah, but he just did it. He sat down and did it one take. And if you've ever listened to that solo, it's considered one of the best solos ever recorded. So.
I never knew it was Eddie Van Halen. And, I had posted about that on Twitter when I heard that story. And of course, like all the boo birds come out and the critics and they're like, how do you not know that was Van Halen? I knew right away when I listened to that. That couldn't be anyone but Eddie Van Halen. Like, whatever, dude. Give me a break.
Yeah.
But so many people are like, how did you not know it was Van Halen? Like,
yeah. But it could, again, remember
thought it was some session. I figure it was a session musician that Jackson just hired,
Yeah, because you think about it at the time, Eddie's influence was affecting everyone. Everyone was starting to play the guitar like Eddie. So there were a lot of imitators out there. So it could have been anybody. It could have been a studio musician. I didn't know it at the time. I found out a lot later on that it was Eddie Van Halen. And then when you say that and then you listen to the solo, you're like, oh yeah, obviously it's Eddie Van Halen. But I wouldn't have known that. I didn't know it up front. And I was a Van Halen fan, so. Anyways, so that's a fun fact. Michael Jackson and Beat It. And
Parker furiously Googles, who was Michael Jackson?
He's like, Michael Jackson? Who the hell is Michael Jackson?
I actually just Googled.
He's a member of the Jackson 5. He broke out on his own. He wore one white glove and invented the moonwalk. I never knew this.
Well, no, I looked up like the top 20 80s rock bands. And on the top 5 into the top 20, it said number 5 was ZZ Top. Number 4 was Aerosmith. Number 3 was REM. Number 2 was
REM.
Oh, geez, sorry.
REM.
Number 2 was I never heard of REM. Who is that?
Number 2 was actually Van Halen, and then they said number 1 was Guns N' Roses for the 1980s.
Oh, come on. No.
And what's interesting is they all sound unique with the exception of REM.
Yeah.
They don't even belong in that same class.
No. Early REM. I would argue early REM was decent, but
Well, it says number 6, like right outside of the top 5 was number 6 being Metallica, and then number 7 being Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
I would take all of them over REM.
Yeah. What about AC/DC?
Yeah.
Not on the
REM.
list. I'm surprised
Let me
AC/DC's
see.
not on that list. They
AC/DC.
were a power band back then.
Number 8 was Journey. Number 9 was the Motley Crue. Number 10, Hall and Oates. Number 11 was Bon Jovi. Number 12, The Cars. Number 13,
Where are you reading this? Who voted on this? That's what I want to know.
it's
Millennials.
It's called Ultimate Classic Rock. This is the website name.
I wouldn't even call Hall and Oates classic rock.
Well,
That's amazing to me.
Well, no,
as we digress, that is amazing to me.
Well, it's the 1980s. They're just summing up bands in the 1980s. So number 13 was Blondie. Number 14, The Pretenders. Number 15, Devo. Number 16 was Huey Lewis and the News. Number 17 was Kiss. Wow. Number 18, The Go-Go's. Number 19, Red Hot Chili Peppers. And number 20, Heart.
So nowhere on that list is AC/DC.
No, which is here. I'm going to pull up. So yeah,
it's insane.
Top 20 American classic rock bands of the 80s.
I mean, AC/DC.
We need to cancel that whole list.
Yeah, because they were huge. They were selling out stadiums then during that time. Go-Go's weren't. I guarantee you that.
All right,
but Belinda Carlisle's cute.
Yeah, Heart was. I saw Heart in concert in the 80s.
Another list here says the top 10 best rock bands of the 80s is number 1, Guns N' Roses, number 2, Queen, number 3, Metallica, number 4, AC/DC, number 5, Bon Jovi, number 6, Foreigner, number 7, Journey, number 8, Motorhead, number 9, REM, and number 10, U2.
Oh.
So you think about how many of those, same kind of time frame, but how many of those artists are influenced by Eddie Van Halen?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it says here that Eddie Van Halen.
I mean, even bands that are bigger names were still influenced by his style, which is fascinating. Yeah.
Well, it says here number 11 was Judas Priest, and then 12 was Van Halen, 13 was Whitesnake, and then 14 was Def Leppard.
I mean, Whitesnake had 2 songs. How could that be even close to?
I don't know. These lists are kind of interesting.
Def Leppard was a bigger hit than Whitesnake ever could dream of. So
yeah. But what was interesting to me is
Judas Priest is an interesting one, Parker. You'd love them. Christian rock band. If you go on your Spotify and just look up Judas Priest live at the Vatican, awesome live album. You'll love it.
I'll have to look it up. But it was interesting when I was looking this up because it almost seemed like I'm probably not gonna. I probably should look it up. But what I'm going to say is
don't listen to Coach Brew, Parker. He's
live at the Vatican, Judas Priest.
Oh wow! I didn't even that went over my head. Now that I really think of it,
I saw it. Went right over, hit the ceiling, bounced off the back wall. So yeah, we've gone down a horrible rabbit hole of really poor polling. Clearly,
well, and it sounded like when I was looking this up, it sounded like people were kind of frustrated that Van Halen wasn't in the top 5 on some of the lists, and then another person was talking about Def Leppard not being on the top 5. AC/DC wasn't on the top 5. It was interesting because all 3 of those bands had something super unique to them.
So what year did Van Halen become Van Hagar, John?
It was after 1984 tour was done. That's when
so
David
does that
Roth
skew the rankings? Because a lot of people you're either Van Halen or Van Hagar, and there's they lost a lot of audience, and then they gained new audience from that. So I just wonder if that skews rankings.
Yeah, I think it did. I think for me as a Van Halen fan, the worst thing they could ever do was gave Eddie Van Halen a synthesizer, and that's Jump was the first song he ever played synthesizer in, and then. And then David Lee Roth left, and you had Sammy Hagar, and for me, it wasn't Van Halen. It wasn't that power rock that we all knew. from like
Yep.
the 70s to the early 80s. So it became something different. I wasn't a huge fan of the music after that, but he's still an innovator and someone that really changed the course of history, really, in the music industry. Yeah.
It's
In multiple genres. There are plenty of guitarists that in other genres that
They use his style. Yeah.
and are fans of his. Yep.
It says here the number
So,
one.
I just realized, Parker.
Yeah.
Follow me on this, John. Remember the Saturday Night Live skit "Unfrozen Caveman"?
Yes.
That's sort of Parker.
Yeah.
Like we've taken him, this Gen Zer, and we've dropped him in the 80s.
Yes.
And he just is like a deer in headlights. Like, who, what? Judas Priest live at the Vatican?
Rim? You ever heard of the band Rim?
The Go-Go's? Rim? Like, he's Unfrozen Caveman right now.
He is the Unfrozen
Which is
Caveman.
kind of fun to see.
Well, see, because I've only heard of like Metallica, AC/DC, Def Leppard, obviously Van
The
Halen.
hair bands, yeah.
Yeah, like all the very like popular. Even I feel like Van Halen he's spread his impacts even to now. Like his music and his lifestyle and the way that he did things has impacted rock music now even.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's how I kind of know them. And then especially like Journey, like I actually listened to Journey. Obviously you got like Don't Stop Believing, stuff like that.
Never heard of it. Yeah, I don't know that one.
Oh yeah. But it says here on this list, throughout the Van Hagar era, it became increasingly clear that Eddie Van Halen's true or perhaps new love was music, not rock and roll.
Yeah, so he got bored with what he's doing. It's kind of like Garth Brooks becoming Chris Gaines and having an alter ego, or just, like Dierks Bentley, country artist, records a bluegrass album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they all
Total
do it.
departure from the traditional lane that you're in, because you're like, and in a way, it's like, to me that's sad, but in a way I totally understand it, because like you are playing probably conservatively 180 nights out of the year the exact same songs.
Yep.
Sometimes you'll switch it up a little, your set list or whatever. That's got to get a little stale. Even if you wrote them and you love them and you have fun and they're high energy and the crowd singing back to you, it's got to get stale. And you kind of want to at some point do something a little different.
Yeah.
Well, and that's in
I understand it. I don't like it, but I understand it.
It said here that here we go. It says here, if conventional songwriting skills helped your hero get where he wanted to go, how can you deny a soaring piece of pop magic like this, which was his number one song was Dreams, supposedly during the Van Hagar, I guess, era.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's just, for Van Halen fans, that is just the worst song ever.
Yeah, and that's literally what it's saying on here, is like there was just such a big split in the scene.
Yep.
Like as soon as he transferred over to like doing some like his new style, it was almost as if his fans couldn't transfer with him.
So I think there's a lesson there for everybody. You talk about like brands and entrepreneurs and what you become known for, and like Parker, do you remember when ESPN released the cell phone?
Mm-mm.
At least
do you think I'm making that up? I'm just BSing you to see if like you'll buy that and you believe it. You're like, ESPN didn't do that.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know.
Am I just making shit up?
I can never tell if you're I feel like I'm about to say something stupid.
I don't know. I've never heard of that. So.
They legit released a cell phone. It was a huge failure because they're not a communications technology company. They're a sports brand. They're the number one brand among men. They're not a communications technology company like a Motorola at the time. You remember when McDonald's made pizza and sold pizza, the McPizza?
Yeah.
I do. I remember hearing about something about McDonald's. Also, they tried selling what's like the barbecue McDonald's thing, the
McRib.
McRib. Best
That's
food.
that's another whole thing that's got a kind of a cult following. But their pizza was a colossal failure. It was awful because they didn't stay in their lane. And it's kind of what we're talking about with musicians and brands. Like, you become known for one thing, and if you deviate too far from that, you're going to lose a big chunk of your core audience that brought you the success that you gained.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's important, important to, keep your voice, stay in your, I mean, be careful when you venture outside your lane, because it's, there's a lot of history where people have done that and have failed miserably. So,
Like,
I
would
know
Peak Demand ever just like form a line of lingerie?
no, but that's something I've been thinking about.
I bet you have. So, like, it's not the same audience.
No.
It's not what you become known for. It's kind of the same thing. I took it to an extreme, but you have to be very mindful of that, I think. So,
Yeah,
and to
absolutely.
know your audience really well and what they like and what they want, and not deviate from that. And I think that's a great segue to the other artist that we're going to talk about, which is Mr. Eric frickin' Church.
Eric freaking Church. So let's talk about Eric Church. So Coach Brew, tell us a little bit about Eric Church.
He is, well, it's interesting that, one of his albums is named The Outsiders, and he likes to fancy himself as an outsider in the country music scene. He definitely had a non-traditional route. He's one of those organic artists that, didn't just show up in Nashville, get a record deal, and have a massive marketing machine behind him. He had to do it organically and tour and playing a lot of small venues. And then when he did get a record deal and he had the opportunity to go on tour and open up for, major kind of quote stadium status artists, the fact that Eric Church has, let's just say, he has a little bit of trouble with authority and doesn't like to follow rules, that really started to work against him. He started his touring with oh God, what's the name of the band? Rascal Flatts. He was touring with Rascal Flatts, opening for them. And he started to get in a little trouble because he's going over his time limit, played a little long as the opening act. And then, he got warned about doing that. And then the next tour stop, he played a little too loud and got warned about doing that. And just kind of got sick of being micromanaged, even though, like, you're there as tour support. You're there to support the headliner. Gets sick of doing that. So he, I think they're in Madison Square Garden, and he decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go all over the stage. He got in trouble before and going on parts of the stage he wasn't allowed on as the opening act. They went all over the stage. They played way too loud and went way over their time limit. And he got fired from the Rascal Flatts tour that night. Middle of the tour. Gets fired from the tour. Like, to get fired in the middle of a tour that people have already bought tickets for, like, that takes a lot. So someone was interviewing and they're like, at what point did you know you're going to be in deep trouble and pretty much going to get fired from the tour? He's like, oh, right away. But here's the funny thing about it is no one knew who he was while he was opening for Rascal Flatts and while he was tour support for whoever he opened up for on a tour before that. But the second that it became national news that he got kicked off Rascal Flatts tour, everyone knew who Eric Church was. And so he knew right away he was being kicked off the tour. And he and his band went back to like touring smaller clubs in an RV instead of a big tour bus and doing large venues. Anyway, he is claiming credit for launching the career of Taylor Swift, because at the time no one really knew who Taylor Swift was. She replaced him on the Rascal Flatts tour. And then she went on to have her first album that she had released at the time went platinum. And as soon as she replaced him, he sent her a message saying, congratulations. And I want one of those platinum albums when you get one, from going, from blowing up on this tour. So the fun thing was she sent him one.
Mm.
And it was like a year later, whenever, but like she probably never would have had the opportunity for that exposure if he hadn't gotten kicked and gotten himself kicked off that tour. But what happened is he realized he wasn't a fit. That wasn't his audience. If you ever listen to Rascal Flatts and if you listen to Eric Church, they couldn't be more dissimilar. It'd be like listening to the Go-Go's and Van Halen. Like it's just.
What's interesting though is his story is almost similar, which was he had to find his own voice. That he realized that he was kind of playing underneath somebody else, and he was in somebody else's shadows, and he was bold enough to know that he could stand on his own and with his own voice, and he was willing to take the risk, the chance of starting over again and getting off these big stadium tours where he was getting a lot of exposure, but he wasn't able to really show his true voice. And so that's kind of an interesting story. I didn't know that about him, but it is certainly the mark of an X Factor person who recognizes that, look, I'm going to have to make a shift here. This isn't the way, isn't working for me the way I want it to work. And I'm willing to take the risk of starting all over again and building it up from the ground up because I'm confident enough in my abilities.
Yeah, he bet on himself. And
betting on himself is a great example of people with the X Factor.
Huge step backwards on paper in theory, but he knew he wasn't the right audience, wasn't the right fit. He was finding his own people. And a lot of his people were just kind of like disenfranchised outsiders who didn't really fit in the mainstream. Like he didn't really fit in with mainstream country music. And it was a lot of, work hard, play hard, rebellious, his audience is in his likeness. Rebellious young men who would like drink and fight at his shows. And, I remember someone asking him, what's it like? What's the audience like at an Eric Church show? He said, you're going to see all walks of life. It's a lot of people like me, but also you're going to see, he said, I could tell you at what point during the show, looking at the set list, you're going to see people having sex in the audience. And then depending on what song's playing later in the show, you're going to see people, I can tell you, all right, here's when people are going to start fighting in the audience. And he says, just that kind of crowd, but he had to go out on his own organically and find his audience and grow it from there and take chances. Like he wrote a song called 2 Pink Lines. This is about a pregnancy test and his label didn't want him to release it. They're like, that's a little too edgy. It's a little too scandalous. And he's like, I don't care. He said, drop me or include this on the album, include it on the album. And I think it might've gone to number 1. His mom called to congratulate him. And she's like, I don't really understand the song though. She's like, why are they 2 pink lions? She thought it was 2 pink lions. And he had to explain to his mom as a song about a pregnancy test, which is kind of funny, but took a chance of that one. His next album, he decided to take a chance outside of the mainstream with another song called Smoke a Little Smoke, which is about smoking weed well before it was legalized or popular. And again, same conversation, we're going to release that, and it was all, those songs were tested live in shows and he got a great response from the crowd. So he knew he had the confidence to bring that to market. And I think that's the part of the X Factor is knowing when to stand your ground and knowing that something is going, having confidence is going to have, a broad appeal because you've tested it. Have you product tested what you're about to release? Like, do you have any idea something that you're about to launch is going to be popular? Or are you just, blindfolding yourself and throwing stuff to dartboard? He knew it was going to have appeal because he heard people singing it back to him every night in these dingy little, dive bars and honky tonks. So,
he was listening to the voice. He could hear the voice of the customer right there, real time. As an entrepreneur myself, when you launch a product, you don't know how it's going to work out. And I know when we were designing our products, we actually brought in, I'm in the electrical products business. We brought in electrical linemen from utilities and say, what do you hate about the current batch of products that exist today? And we took all of their ideas and we put it in the product. It's just the idea of just like listening to what what are some of the concerns? In this case, he's hearing people, cheer for a song,
Yeah.
and he knows he's willing to bet on that because he's listened to the voice of the customer and incorporated that into that next album.
So if you don't get anything from this podcast, but one thing, I want it to be what John just shared with you. Take your customers, take your prospective customers and ask them, what do you hate about, these products? What do you hate about, everything vendors in your industry are trying to serve you up and cram down your throat? What's wrong with it? Because we want to be the one company that actually listens, solves the problem, and fixes it. But then you have to be willing to actually put your money where your mouth is and do it.
Yeah.
But the rewards are immense, if you will.
It's an interesting story, Coach Brew. There's a guy he developed a product and sold it on Amazon. And the only thing he did was he went out and researched 1-star reviews on an Amazon product. And these were skewers, these little, like you'd make a shish kebab on, the shish kebab skewers. And he went on and he researched everybody's shish kebab skewers, and he read every 1-star review, and he made a long list. And the main complaint was that they weren't long enough. So he went over to China and found a vendor that could make them longer. And he started selling that on Amazon, and ended up creating $1 million product of slightly longer barbecue skewers. My point being is that
did they have COVID on them? Did they come over with COVID on them?
Could lick them and get COVID. That was the neat thing about them. They were coated with.
See, that's the only sad part. Like, it's a great story. The sad part is he had them made in China and not the United States.
Well, yeah, I know, but the point.
But you think about it, they're too short. Yeah, they rust. Yeah. Right. They bend too easily.
Yeah.
Like, I could give you all the 1-star reviews. If you go with the wooden ones, they splinter.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
So if you want to research,
it's not hard. You got to be willing to do it.
Yeah. So if you're looking at trying to develop a product or do something, you could go on Amazon and look at all the 1-star reviews, and you'll find all of your negative feedback right there without actually having to talk to a customer. So the point is,
it's like your competition is paying to do your beta testing for you. Think about that.
Right. 1-star reviews are beautiful. They're actually probably more important than 5-star reviews.
It's my favorite review I've ever gotten on my book Stadium Status was a 1-star review.
Yeah. What did it say? Anything?
This book should be burned. So I took that 1-star review, and I had a graphic designer put flames on the book cover.
I love it.
Like it was on fire. And underneath it, I wrote a caption, onto an MP3 for an audiobook.
Ah, beautiful.
And I use that to market my audiobook.
I love it.
So you can use the energy from your haters to sell what you got.
Yeah.
But yeah, 1-star reviews are just also fun to read. That's a great rabbit hole.
Going on that topic, not to interrupt, but this is actually, I looked this up about Eric Church, which is really interesting.
Eric freaking Church.
Yeah.
DFE.
Yeah, he actually he carries this, like, kind of a fact that people don't know, but he carries a list of people who stood in his way. On him.
Yep.
Ooh.
And this is what it has to say.
I have that same list on my phone on Evernote.
No, but it says here, Church still bears the scars from his early struggles in country music, including now an infamous time when he was fired from Rascal Flatts tour early on for flouting their rules.
Yep.
In an interview with Playboy, he admitted he holds long-standing grudges and admires others who do, including Michael Jordan. Yep. I've never seen, this is Eric, this is like...
They're
Eric,
both Carolina boys, by the way, so it's no surprise. Yeah.
But it says here, Eric Church, end quote, it says, I've never seen a person... Oh, wait. This is... Yeah. I've never seen a person hold grudges like that, and I like that because I carry a hell of a chip on my shoulder, he says. Church has memorized the list of those who held him back, and he admits, I carried that list on stage with me.
Yep.
Now,
So,
that's a really good, we could jump down this rabbit hole, but I do believe that that is one of the major competitive advantages. If you have a chip on your shoulder, which by the way, I do,
a healthy
and
chip. Yeah.
I know a lot of other people that do, that are very successful entrepreneurs, because they are pissed off because someone, something, somewhere said they couldn't do it. And if you want to know what drives me every day, is to prove every one of them wrong.
Yep.
And it's a powerful motivator.
I feel like it's almost like you have to get people to tell you that you suck, like you absolutely suck, in order to propel you past that.
If you have the X factor, that's what will do it. If someone tells you you suck and you're fragile, or you don't want it bad enough, then you're probably going to go do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's
like, it's a test to see how bad you really want it.
And that's why I think you need to be exposed to full feedback, right? I mean, we say sometimes we want to protect children from negative feedback. Well, that might just be the one thing that they need to change. You're fat. Okay, well, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get in shape, and I'm going to be the best athlete that I possibly can be, right? You can only play line. You can't be a running back. All right, well, I'll show you what I can do, So I think sometimes that negative feedback can be a really good and important driver for success. So I say, bring it on. Bring on those 1-star reviews. Like John said,
Absolutely.
It's a great and powerful motivator, and you can use that, to power your success. I really do believe in that. So,
and knowing who your audience is huge. This is that final piece on church that I wanted to share with everybody is, the way he basically takes what the mainstream is doing and does the exact opposite, which is right up my alley. And that's like my whole playbook. We'll do the opposite what everybody else is doing. They're going this way, I'm going that way. At a time when, there's a traditional way that you release music. You share it with the radio stations, you put it on Spotify and iTunes, you share it with the media, you go on those radio tours, and then the last people to get the music are the fans. They're the last ones to get the physical copies of the music. Well, he turned that whole thing on its head with his album, Mr. Misunderstood. And he took his fan club and shipped every single member of his fan club a copy of the vinyl record. There's a little genius, like kind of long game genius. I'm sure that's not really why he did it, but I'll get to that. But no one knew they were getting it. They just got it in the mail. To hide this whole album release from his record label, when they asked him what he was doing in the studio, he told them he was recording a Christmas album. And not new music, just Christmas music. It was like in the public domain, which a lot of artists do. So they're like, oh, okay. Anyway, to make sure this information didn't leak out to the public in any way, he had to go buy a vinyl record pressing plant in Germany to have the records made, so that wouldn't, like, if it were done in the United States, someone working there would leak that to the American public or to his label or whatever.
Wow.
So he had that made there on white vinyl and had it shipped to each of his fans in what was called the Church Choir, which is his fan club, which I'm a member of. So you just get this package in mail from Eric Church with a kind of a photocopied handwritten note on yellow, like a yellow legal pad, a legal pad just like this, handwritten note, and about like why he released the music the way he did, and it's for you, and he doesn't want anything for it, just share it. And share it. Everyone did. It was a massive amount of earned media that you couldn't even have possibly purchased in paid media. The amount of impressions he got for free of people taking pictures on social media and sharing it, or, hey, look what just came in the mail, doing an unboxing video, playing the record on their record player, was how most of the American public, fan club members playing the record on a record player on social media, is how most of the American public found out Eric Church released a new album. And he did that the day before he was scheduled to appear on the CMA Awards or the ACM Awards, I forget which. And when he was supposed to announce like album of the year or whatever, he sent a proxy up there, and it was the kid from the Mr. Misunderstood video that he found in like Syracuse or Rochester, New York, I think. His name is Mickey Smithers, and it's just total guerrilla marketing. And it's genius because it's a me kind of moment. You get to announce. Every artist goes up and announces one of those awards in every award show of every genre. Actors announce, Oscars and things for their peers. He sent a fan. He sent basically the kid that was the poster child for the album up there, and everyone's like, "Who the hell is this?" The kid played, in the video, so he paints his fans into the picture. He doesn't ask anything in return. He didn't say, "Here's a free record. Please tweet this 20 times, post it on Instagram 5 times, plaster it on your Facebook, and send a link to all your friends to go buy it." He just gave it to his most rabid fans and let them take it from there.
I love it.
And I think it's
a great, powerful lesson of how to, you want to get noticed, right? This is how you get noticed.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. Powerful. You know where he went to school, by the way, where he went to college?
Appalachian State,
where my son is finishing up his master's degree right now. So
has your son been to any of the football games?
Oh yeah, all the time.
So Eric Church's music is the hype video on the Jumbotron.
Yeah, it is.
For the games. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so that's great. I really didn't know too much about Eric Church, and now that I do, I'm gonna have to look up his music. Parker, do you know Eric Church too much, or are you a country music guy?
Yeah, I've listened to a little bit of his stuff. I'm not too familiar with his work, but I have listened to a little bit of it.
Oh, good deal. Well, that definitely, Eric is someone who's doing something unique, different, and hey, he's selling out stadiums, right? He's definitely
X Factor.
He's got the X Factor, absolutely. Well, we got two great artists. We talked about Eddie Van Halen, talked about Eric Church. Both were innovators, I would say, and both made a name for themselves, and both have changed the industry. So that's exactly the kind of people we want to be talking about on this podcast. So really good stuff.
Where can people learn more about this podcast?
They can learn it at YouTube and Instagram, the X Factor Podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, links to everyone's accounts and the account for this podcast will be linked in the description below the video. And if you're listening to it on Anchor, it will be also linked in the description on Anchor.
So look to the show notes, and you'll get links to all of our individual social media accounts, and you get to know Jon Rennie, you get to know Coach Brew, you get to know the DFE, Parker. You can follow our socials there. So we are big on social media. I mean, we're huge. I think Coach Brew, you have a check mark, don't you? You have a blue check mark.
I am a verified nobody. That's correct.
You are a blue check mark on Twitter. Some of us just aspire to be there. I have a little American flag by my name. That's about all I got. So,
and I think the big timers have a little blue hat next to their name, just like Coach Randall.
Coach, yes, he's got a blue hat.
Being Coach Randall verified with a blue hat is where it's at.
I love it. So follow us on socials. We talk a lot about this stuff on our individual social accounts. And of course we do that on the X Factor social accounts as well. So subscribe and share. This is the X Factor podcast. And because again, we want to find as many as we can P1 fans. And Coach Brew, what is a P1 fan?
Oh, well, originally P1 stood for preset number 1, when you actually had a radio in your car and you pushed a button to preset your dial to a certain station. Now, I guess we would just call it podcast number 1. What would you call it, John? P1 now.
P1 of your number
programming
1
numero uno.
Exactly. You have it. You're subscribed, so it always comes up on your feed when a new episode drops. So you are a P1 fan if you're subscribed and you're sharing it with your friends.
And P1s are the finest human beings on the planet. They tend to have exquisite taste, be very intelligent, handsome, I might add, and enjoy the finer things in life, like this podcast.
Absolutely.
And rich Corinthian leather and fine bourbon.
Absolutely.
Exotic cars.
And you never know when a white vinyl album might show up in your mailbox for being a P1 fan.
Yeah.
You never know. I may never know if that happens.
If you're going to be a P1 of the X Factor podcast, you need to subscribe. You need to share it, rate it, review it, and follow us on socials. That is how you become a P1. If you're a P2 or a P3, we've just given you something to aspire to. And Jon Rennie has just raised the bar for you in life. So rise to meet it. That's all I got for you.
That's it.
There you have it.
That's the X Factor podcast. You all take care.
See you, party people.